The year was 1961. The Cold War intensified with the building of the Berlin Wall, while Americans watched Alan Shepard become the first American in space. As these historic events unfolded, the music scene was experiencing its own revolution, with unforgettable hits that still resonate today. Let's get into the greatest songs of 1961 that defined an era. Ray Charles's Hit the Road, Jack showcases the pioneering artist at the height of his powers, blending R&B, jazz, and pop into something entirely new. Born into poverty in Georgia and blind by age 7, Charles overcame staggering obstacles on his path to success. By 1961, Charles was engaged in what many industry insiders considered career suicide, breaking his contract with Atlantic Records to sign with ABC Paramount. This controversial move was driven by Charles' determination to own his master recordings, a concept almost unheard of for black artists at the time. While it secured his financial future, many critics and former colleagues criticized him for abandoning his R&B roots for more commercial sounds. The gamble paid off handsomely. With ABC, Charles gained unprecedented creative control and ownership stakes that made him one of the wealthiest recording artists of his era. The success of Hit the Road, Jack vindicated his business acumen, but Charles's personal life remained turbulent. His well-documented heroin addiction, which began in his teens and continued up until 1965, led to multiple arrests and damaged relationships. Despite these struggles, Charles maintained a punishing work schedule into his 70s, releasing over 60 albums across multiple genres. Even after his death in 2004, controversy followed him. His final album, Genius Loves Company, won 8 Grammy Awards amid whispers that the recording industry had overlooked him during his prime years. The vocalist on Hit the Road, Jack isn't Charles himself for much of the song. It's Margie Hendricks, a member of his backing group, the Shirelles, with whom Charles was having an affair at the time. The song's call and response structure highlights their complex personal relationship, adding unintended emotional weight to lines like, "That's right, hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more." Another fascinating detail, songwriter Percy Mayfield, who penned the track, originally submitted it to Charles as a slow blues ballad. Charles completely reimagined it as the upbeat, defiant anthem we know today. Mayfield, a talented performer whose own career was derailed after a disfiguring car accident, reportedly didn't recognize his composition when he first heard Charles's version, but was thrilled with the results and the substantial royalties it generated. Ben E. King's Stand By Me. Stand by me. So darling, emerged from the ashes of his departure from the Drifters, a split that involved financial disputes and management conflicts that still generate debate among music historians. King, born Benjamin Earl Nelson, had led the Drifters to some of their biggest hits, including Save the Last Dance for Me, but was making just $100 per week, while the group's management raked in thousands from their performances. After leaving, King collaborated with legendary songwriting team Lieber and Stoller to create Stand By Me, a song that almost never happened. King had initially offered it to the Drifters, who rejected it. Even more surprisingly, King revealed decades later that the now iconic bass line was improvised during the recording session when the original arrangement wasn't working. Though Stand By Me reached number 4 on the charts in 1961, King's biggest career resurgence came in 1986, when the song was featured in the Rob Reiner film of the same name. This second wave of popularity introduced King to a new generation and catapulted the 25-year-old recording back into the top 10, making it one of the few songs in history to become a hit in 2 different decades with the same recording. Despite this renewed success, King struggled with financial problems throughout much of his later life, declaring bankruptcy in the 1990s. He continued performing until shortly before his death in 2015, advocating for legislation to ensure artists receive proper royalties from their work. The biblical inspiration behind Stand By Me remains one of music's most interesting origin stories. King drew from both Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble, and a gospel arrangement by Sam Cooke's group, The Soul Stirrers, called Stand By Me, Father. King transformed these spiritual foundations into a secular love song while preserving their emotional depth. Another little-known fact, King didn't actually play any instruments and couldn't read music. He would sing his musical ideas to session musicians, who would then translate them into the finished arrangements. This method of composition, while unconventional, allowed for a natural, emotional quality in his work that might have been lost with more formal music training. Don't let these musical memories fade away. If you remember dancing to these hits or they bring back special moments from your youth, hit that like button right now. Better yet, subscribe to our channel for more trips down memory lane and share this video with friends who appreciate real music from the golden age. Now, let's keep this musical journey going. The Shirelles made history with Dedicated to the One I Love. Although this 1961 version was actually their second attempt at recording the song. Their first release in 1959 barely made a ripple on the charts. The group, formed in 1957 by high school classmates in Passaic, New Jersey, faced enormous challenges as young black women in a music industry dominated by white male executives. Despite their groundbreaking success, the Shirelles were victims of one of the music industry's most notorious exploitation schemes. Their record label, Scepter Records, owned by Lawrence Greenberg, reportedly kept the group on modest salaries, while their hits generated millions, leading to bitter legal disputes that lasted decades and prevented them from receiving proper royalties. While the Shirelles are often celebrated as pioneers who paved the way for later girl groups from the Supremes to the Ronettes, their later years weren't kind to them professionally. By the mid-1960s, the British invasion and changing musical tastes pushed them from the spotlight. The group continued performing in various incarnations throughout the decades, but legal troubles persisted. A particularly contentious battle erupted when their images and life stories were used without proper compensation in the Broadway musical Baby It's You, about Lawrence Greenberg. Original member Shirley Owens, later Shirley Alston Reeves, fought for recognition until Scepter's catalog was sold in the 1990s, finally securing some financial stability for the group members who had survived. The recording of Dedicated to the One I Love contains a fascinating technical anomaly that audio engineers still discuss today. During the song's bridge, lead singer Shirley Owens' voice was accidentally recorded with an unusual echo effect when she moved too close to a specific part of the studio. Rather than re-record, producer Luther Dixon decided the haunting quality enhanced the emotional impact of the lyrics. This happy accident became one of the song's most distinctive features. Additionally, the song was originally recorded by the Five Royales in 1957, but the Shirelles version changed the arrangement significantly, transforming a relatively obscure R&B tune into a pop masterpiece that influenced countless artists, including the Mamas and the Papas, who had their own hit with the song in 1967. Bobby V's Take Good Care of My Baby. Take good care of my baby showcases the voice of a teenager who got his big break through tragedy. At just 15 years old, V, born Robert Villain, was thrust into the spotlight after the February 1959 plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper. When the tour promoters needed a replacement act for the next scheduled performance in Moorhead, Minnesota, V and a hastily assembled band of schoolmates stepped in. This bittersweet origin story has often been overshadowed by a more controversial connection. Early in his career, V briefly employed a young pianist who called himself Elston Gunn, but couldn't play in tune. That pianist was none other than Robert Zimmerman, soon to become Bob Dylan, who later mocked V's commercial pop style. Throughout the 1960s, V charted multiple hits, but by the 1970s, his career declined as musical taste changed. Unlike many of his contemporaries, however, V maintained a steady touring schedule well into the 2000s, particularly in the UK and Europe, where his fan base remained strong. In 2011, V made the difficult announcement that he had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease, forcing his retirement from performing. Before his passing in 2016, he released one final album, The Adobe Sessions, recorded with his family in a makeshift studio, a poignant full-circle moment for a man whose career began with a family band. Few people realize that V's hit, Take Good Care of My Baby, was written by Carole King and Jerry Coffin, the legendary songwriting duo responsible for dozens of hits. The song captures the emotional maturity that characterized V's appeal, a teenager singing about heartbreak with unexpected dignity and grace. While performing in Hamburg, Germany, V's rendition of this song reportedly caught the attention of young Beatles who were still developing their own style. Paul McCartney later cited V's clean-cut vocal approach as an influence on their early sound, though this connection remains largely unacknowledged in Beatles history. Lawrence Welk stormed the charts in 1961 with Calcutta, a song that dominated the Billboard Hot 100 for weeks. Welk, born in 1903 to German-speaking immigrants from Russia, began his musical journey at just 4 years old when his father crafted him a violin from a wooden cigar box. Despite his later fame, Welk's early years were marked by struggle and controversy. He left home at 21, unable to speak English well, and faced significant discrimination for his accent and heritage during a time of strong anti-German sentiment following World War I. By 1961, Welk had transformed himself into a television icon with The Lawrence Welk Show, which had been running since 1955 and would continue until 1982. What many don't know is that network executives at ABC initially considered Welk's show too old-fashioned and repeatedly tried to cancel it due to its champagne music style that seemed out of place in the rock and roll era. Yet Welk's defiance of contemporary trends proved successful. After ABC finally dropped the show in 1971, it continued in syndication for another decade, maintaining impressive viewership among older Americans who rejected the counterculture movement. Here's something surprising about Calcutta. Despite its exotic name, the song has absolutely nothing to do with the Indian city. Written by German composer Heino Gaze under the original title Tivoli Melody, it was renamed to capitalize on Western fascination with exotic Eastern locations. Welk himself reportedly disliked the song initially and only recorded it after persistent urging from his musical director. This reluctant recording went on to sell over 1 million copies and remains the only #1 pop hit in Welk's extensive career. As we close this musical time capsule from 1961, it's clear these songs weren't just hits. They were the soundtrack to your lives during a pivotal time in American history. From Lawrence Welk's unexpected pop success to Ray Charles's genre-defying innovations, these artists shaped music for generations to come. If you enjoyed this journey back to 1961, make sure to subscribe for more videos exploring the golden age of music. Share your own memories of these songs in the comments below. What were you doing when you first heard them? Your stories are what keep this musical history alive.